When talking about resurrection, physical resurrection, spiritual resurrection, obviously many times the Bible doesn't really differentiate between the two, but obviously Jesus was physically resurrected and his body was physically changed, and therefore his body was able to function in heaven and on earth. In one sense, there was a bodily resurrection when Jesus was resurrected, because according to Matthew, people came out of the tombs and gave witness and testimony to the power of resurrection for a while. And I would assume that they went back into heaven when Jesus went back, because they went back into a cloud and they were then part of the cloud of witnesses. During the period that Jesus said, the generation before the end of the old and the beginning of the new, there was lots of things that were going to take place, and ultimately at the final end of the old and the beginning of the new, that is when the resurrection did take place. It's not a future resurrection for us, it was a resurrection for them, because all who are in the grave at that point, and that was in Sheol. And there was two aspects of Sheol. Those who were classed righteous were in paradise, and those who were not classed righteous were generally in Sheol. Jesus led captivity captive, so he took everyone out of there to finally end the old and beginning of the new. And you can also read about that in Daniel, which actually talks about the comparison between the end of the old, the judgment of Jerusalem, and resurrection of the dead. So that happened at that point, not in a future. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't see loved ones again, because you can see them now, actually, if you engage the cloud of witnesses. If they're believers, you can engage them in the cloud of witnesses. If they weren't, then they've gone into the fire of God's love, into his judgment, and his judgment is not a judgment to death. His judgment is a judgment to life, but they have yet to receive that life because they've not come through Jesus. So those in the fire of God's love, the purification and refining of them continues until they accept Jesus, and then they come into the same resurrection spiritually and, in that way. But when you're in the realms of heaven, you don't need a physical body. And when I'm there in the realms of heaven, I'm seeing myself in a spiritual form. Now, there are those who didn't die, Enoch, Elijah, and others, who still have a body, but that body is not the same as the physical body, just as Jesus's wasn't the same as his physical body on earth. There was abilities that his body had to be into a dual realm. So I think there's a lot more to understand about all of that. But I do not believe there is a physical resurrection coming at the end of the age when everyone will get a new body. Anyone, for me, who is spiritually resurrected and who happens to die and then goes into that realm receives a body like Jesus. Their actual physical body, if they're either cremated or they're buried, will actually decay. So essentially, you get a new way of living, which is where spirit, soul, and body are in a heavenly perspective, operating in a different way, different dimension. But I wouldn't be too concerned about thinking about the future. Those in the graves will hear the voice of the Son of God. Those in the tombs will hear that. They have heard it. They've already responded one way or another. And those who did not respond or able to respond to Jesus then were able to respond to Jesus later. So in a sense, this has already taken place, just as everything Jesus said would happen in that generation has taken place. Some of it is spiritual, some of it's physical. There was a spiritual dimension of a new temple, and there was a physical dimension where the old temple was destroyed. So we are the new wineskin, the temple of the Holy Spirit. The old temple, which was a model of the old thing where God was only in one place, his glory in the temple, that was also named heaven and earth. And when the new heavens and the earth came, which is effectively this new covenant life that we're living, we're now the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we're now the new Jerusalem, effectively, corporately. So again, this is what I believe. Some of these things I've experienced, But of course, you're entitled to a different opinion if you want. There's no problem. You feel free. Always take it back to God and see what the Father will say to you directly. But you can and will meet your deceased loved ones, either now or in the future, because there will be a change of ages when the restoration of all things comes to a completion. Then we'll move on to the ages to come, and whatever that might be. But those cloud of witnesses are surrounding us right now and are accessible to us. I've visited my father in that realm, and others, and I've seen many of the cloud of witnesses who respond to us.